Let me tell you how I almost got arrested for jaywalking on a station that could hold 4 Earths in its cargo bay. I know how that sounds. You picture some grand thing, a warlord, a fleet, a last stand with the stars burning behind me. That's not how it went. It went like this. I was tired. I was carrying a bag of dried noodles I'd overpaid for, and a policewoman half my height stopped me because my boots were on the wrong side of a yellow line painted on the floor. That's the truth. The whole galaxy story, the one they still whisper about in the outer traffic lanes, it started with a yellow line and a bag of noodles. I'll try to tell it straight. I'm not good at this part, the telling. Give me a broken engine and a wrench and I'm fine for a week, but words slip, so bear with me. My name doesn't matter much anymore. Back then everyone called me Corin. Corin Aldous if you want it whole. Just a freight mechanic working the long hauls, 41 years old, bad knee, worse temper before coffee. That's who I was on the manifest. That's who I wanted to be. The station was called Vesendrel. You've probably never heard of it, and honestly, good. It's the kind of place you pass through and forget, a ring the size of a small moon spinning slow out past the 3rd jump gate. Traders came there to sell. Refugees came there to disappear. And people like me came there because the fuel was cheap and nobody asked questions. It was raining inside the station when I arrived. I need you to understand that because it stuck with me. They had weather in there. Actual weather. The dome was so big the air made its own clouds up near the top girders, and every few hours a fine gray drizzle would come down over the marketeers, soft and warm, and everybody would just keep walking like it was nothing. The locals had these translucent hoods that folded out of their collars. I didn't. So I walked through it with rain in my collar and my bag held over my head, muttering, and I remember thinking, of all the places to have a leak, they built one on purpose. The smell hit next. Fried root cakes, hot metal, something floral and sweet from a stall selling glowing fruit, and underneath all of it that faint burnt ozone taste every station has, the one that never leaves your throat. Voices layered on top of each other in 9 languages. Somewhere a child was crying and being shushed in a warbling, bird-like tongue. A cargo announcement boomed overhead and nobody listened. I loved it, if I'm honest. That noise. After 3 weeks alone in a freighter with only the hum of the drive corps for company, the mess of a crowded station felt like a warm bath. I was heading for the transit hub on Tier 2. My ship was docked, my contract was done, and I had 6 hours before the next long haul out. 6 hours to eat something that wasn't paste, sleep somewhere that didn't vibrate, and stay invisible. That was the plan. That was always the plan. The trouble with plans is they need you to be boring, and something in me has never quite managed it. There was a checkpoint between the market and the hub. Nothing dramatic, a low arch, a scanner post, 2 officers in slate gray uniforms waving people through. On most stations you don't even slow down. You flash your chit, the scanner blinks green, you keep moving. I'd done it 1,000 times. The line was long. The rain was picking up. Ahead of me a big 4-armed hauler was arguing about a crate, and the whole queue had backed up, people shuffling and grumbling, steam rising off wet shoulders. I stepped sideways to see how bad it was. And that's when it happened. That's the whole crime. I stepped over a yellow line on the floor, a line I hadn't even seen, worn half away, just a smear of paint marking where the queue was supposed to hold. On the other side of it was an empty lane meant for priority transit. A voice said, "Hold there." I looked down, because I had to look down. She came up to about my chest, small even for her kind, and her kind, I'd learned, were called the Sethri. Gray-blue skin, smooth like river stone, no hair, with a pattern of faint darker markings running up the sides of her neck like the grain in wood. 2 eyes, large, the color of wet amber, set a little wider apart than a human's. She wore the slate uniform sealed against the rain, and on her shoulder was a badge shaped like a 3-pointed star. Everything about her was neat, buttoned, correct. Her name, printed on her chest in 3 scripts, translated to Officer Naila Vantros. You crossed the transit line, she said. Her translator gave her a flat, careful voice, but I could hear the real one underneath it, higher, clipped, young. That lane is restricted. Step back in present identification. Sorry, I said, and I stepped back. Didn't see it, long day. Identification, she repeated. She held up a scanner, a little gray wand with a soft glowing tip. Now here's the thing you have to know about me, and it's not something I'm proud of. I had 2 IDs. One was clean, Corin Aldis, freight mechanic, licensed, boring. The other was buried 3 layers deep in the same chit, encrypted, dead, sealed by 3 separate governments and 1 treaty that half the galaxy pretended didn't exist. That second one wasn't supposed to be readable. It wasn't supposed to exist at all. I'd been promised by people with more medals than sense that it was gone, erased, locked so deep that even I couldn't open it. They lied, or they were careless, or the Sethri just built better scanners than anyone expected. I still don't know which. I handed her the chit. She touched the wand to it, the tip glowed, and I watched her face. I'm good at faces. You learn it in my old line of work. You learn to read the exact half-second before someone decides to do something. And I watched Officer Nayla Vantros read my clean ID, nod slightly, start to hand it back. And then stop. The wand pulsed, once. A soft chime, then a different chime lower that I'd never heard a scanner make. Her large amber eyes flicked down to the little readout on her wrist. I saw them widen. I saw her go very, very still. The rain kept falling. The queue kept grumbling. The 4-armed hauler was still arguing about his crate. And in the middle of all of it, this small gray officer stood frozen with my whole buried life glowing on her wrist. Sir, she said, her voice had changed. The clipped confidence was gone. Sir, this file is sealed under the Concord Accords. Must be a glitch, I said, easy calm. Old ID, ignore it. It is not a glitch. She looked up at me, and I'll never forget the way she looked at me because it wasn't fear, not yet. It was the way a child looks at a picture in a history book that has suddenly stepped off the page. This file is a war record, a closed war record. It has a designation I have only seen in training. In a lecture about the Silence War. My stomach dropped about a mile. You have to understand, the Silence War was 112 years past. To her people, to most of the galaxy, it was history, ancient, a thing in books. The war that nearly ended everything, the war so terrible that afterward the Concord itself was built specifically so it could never happen again. Whole species had been born and grown old and died since the Silence War ended. And here I was, standing in a noodle-scented queue, 41 years old. Ma'am, I said gently, I think your scanner's confused. That war was a long time ago. Yes, she whispered, it was. She looked at the readout again, then at me, then at the readout. Your biometric signature, she said slowly, matches the file. And there it was, the half-second. I saw the exact moment she understood. Let me back up. I owe you that much before we go on, because you're probably wondering the same thing she was, and it's fair. I wasn't born 150 years ago. I want to be clear about that because people get it wrong. I was born on a mining colony in a system nobody remembers, a hard place, low gravity, and I grew up fixing machines because machines don't lie and people do. But the Silence War touched everything, even a nothing colony like mine. When it came for us, I was young, angry. And when the recruiters came through offering a way off the rock, I took it, because I was 19 and stupid, and I thought war was something that happened to other people. It isn't, it happened to me. It happened to everyone I knew. I won't tell you the whole of it here. Some of it I've never told anyone, and some of it I've tried to forget so hard it's actually gone. But the short version is this. The Silence War got its name because of what the enemy did. They didn't just kill you. They took your signal, your comms, your beacons, your voice on the line, gone. Whole fleets went dark and were never heard from again. That was the horror of it. Not the dying, the silence. A ship would stop answering, and you'd never know if it drifted or burned, or was simply switched off like a lamp. And humanity, new to the stars, young, loud, stubborn. Humanity did something in that war that the older species have never quite forgiven us for, and never quite forgotten. We didn't go silent. When our ships got hit, when the comms died and the beacons failed, we screamed anyway. We flew into the dark yelling with everything we had, hull to hull, because we would rather die making noise than disappear quiet. The older species had learned over 10,000 years that when the silence came for you, you accepted it. It was dignified. It was correct. We refused. We were rude about it. We were rude about the end of the universe. That's what put us on the map. Not that we won, we barely survived. But that we would not go quietly, and we made the enemy pay for every inch of quiet they tried to take. I was in the worst of it, and near the end, the very end, when there were maybe a few hundred of us left who could still fly, I did a thing. One thing. I'm not going to dress it up. I held a line that couldn't be held at a place called Harrow's Deep, so that a convoy of 9 million refugees could reach the jump gate. I held it for 6 hours with a broken squadron and a dying ship. 9 million people lived because of those 6 hours. And when the conquered wrote its history afterward, when it needed a name for the thing a human could do that no one thought a human could do, they wrote mine. Then they took my name off everything, sealed it, gave me a new life and a warning to keep my head down, because a living legend from the Silence War is not a man. It's a symbol, and symbols get people killed. So I became Corin Aldis, freight mechanic, and it worked. For a very long time it worked. Until a young Sethri policewoman scanned a bag of noodles worth of ID, and the whole thing came apart under fluorescent rain. "You're him," Officer Vantros breathed. "I'm a mechanic," I said. "You are the warden of Harrow's Deep." I flinched. I couldn't help it. Nobody had said that name to my face in 90 years. Hearing it out of the mouth of this small gray stranger in a noodle queue with rain in my collar, it hit me somewhere I keep locked. "Please," I said quietly, "keep your voice down." And to her enormous credit, I think about this a lot, she did. She could have panicked. She could have called it in, shouted, made a scene, and the scene would have spread. And by nightfall, every faction on Vessendrel would have known that a living relic of the Silence War was standing on Tier 2, and half of them would have wanted me dead, and the other half would have wanted to own me. She had every regulation on her side to do exactly that. Instead, Officer Naila Vantros looked up at me, this old scarred human in a wet jacket, and she lowered her voice to almost nothing, and she said, "You held the line for 6 hours. "Yeah," I said. "My great-grandmother was on the 3rd refugee ship," she said. "The Sethri were on the 3rd ship, 9 of them, 9 million. Her hands were trembling. I watched her force them still. "If you had not held that line, I would not, my whole family would not." She stopped. She was a professional. She was a young officer in a slate uniform doing her job on a wet Tuesday, and her whole family tree, every branch of it, existed because of 6 hours I mostly don't remember except in nightmares. I didn't know what to say. I never do in these moments. So I said the thing I always say, the thing that's true and useless both. "A lot of people held that line. Most of them didn't come back." "But you did," she said. "And you have been," she gestured, helpless, at my noodles, my wet jacket, my whole small hidden life. "You have been fixing engines." "It's honest work," I said, and I almost smiled. She almost smiled back. And for a second, just a second, it was okay. It was 2 people in the rain, and a debt that could never be paid, and something almost gentle passing between us. Then the 4-armed hauler stopped arguing about his crate. Here's what I didn't know, standing in that queue. I wasn't the only one who'd noticed the scanner make a sound it wasn't supposed to make. Vessendrel was a free station, which is a polite way of saying nobody owned it and everybody watched it. There were listeners in the walls. There were factions that paid good money to know when something unusual passed through, and an ID that pinged a sealed silence war record was about as unusual as it got. Somewhere, a light had turned on. Somewhere, someone with more guns than manners had sat up straight. I felt it before I saw it. You develop a sense, call it a old soldier's itch. The crowd noise changed. Not much. Just a small cold current running the wrong way through it. People were still shuffling, still grumbling, but a few of them had gone quiet, and the quiet ones were moving with purpose. I put a hand on Officer Vantross's shoulder. Gently, she startled. "Officer," I said, and my voice had changed now too, gone low and even, the voice I hadn't used in 90 years. "I need you to do exactly what I say, and I need you to not ask why." "What?" "There are 4 of them," I said. I hadn't turned around, I didn't need to. "One behind the fruit stall, 2 came in off the maintenance ramp, one's pretending to read the departures board and hasn't blinked in a while." I felt her go rigid under my hand. "Don't look, please don't look. Just you have a duress code, yes. Every officer here has one." "Why yes?" "Send it, quietly. Say there's a disturbance at the Tier 2 checkpoint. Don't say my name. Don't say the war. Just get more slate uniforms here, because the more of you there are, the less likely this ends the way it wants to end." Her amber eyes searched my face. She was scared now, properly scared, the way you should be, but underneath the fear there was something steadier, and I recognized it because I'd had it once. She was going to hold. This little gray officer was going to hold. "Who are they?" she whispered, even as her fingers moved, sending the code. "I don't know their faces," I said, "but I know their type. Somebody woke up a scanner alert and sold it fast, and now there are people here who think a 150-year-old war hero is a prize. Some of them want a trophy. Some of them want a weapon. Some of them just want to be the ones who put me in the ground so they can say they did." "That is insane." "That is Tuesday," I said. "Now walk with me, slow, toward the maintenance hatch on the left, not fast. We're 2 people having a nice chat. You're escorting a confused tourist. Smile if your face does that." It didn't, but she tried, and it was the bravest thing I'd seen in decades. We got about 20 steps. I'll tell you exactly how it went, because the way it went matters. It matters that it wasn't a battle. People hear the story now and they imagine explosions. They imagine me tearing through a crowd like a storm. It wasn't that. For a long, awful stretch it was just walking. 2 people walking through a wet market and 4 predators walking parallel to them, and everybody pretending. The stall vendor selling glowing fruit felt it. Animals always know first. He stopped calling his prices and started quietly packing his cart. A mother pulled her crying child closer, without knowing why. The drizzle kept falling. The departures board kept updating. And the one who'd been pretending to read it finally peeled off and began to drift toward us, hands loose, jacket too heavy for the warm rain. "He's coming," I murmured. "Keep walking, 10 more steps to the hatch." "Corin," she said, and I noticed she'd stopped calling me sir. "I know." 5 steps. The man from the departures board angled to cut us off. He was tall, taller than me, some spindly high-gravity build, 3 joints in his arms where I have 2, and he moved like someone who'd hurt people for money and enjoyed the paperwork. He smiled. He had a lot of teeth. "Big man," he said in trade tongue, easy and friendly and awful. "Long way from Harrow's Deep." So they knew. Of course they knew. The scanner alert had gone out wide. I stopped walking. There was no more point in the pretense, and pretense was slowing me down. I put myself between him and Officer Vantross. Just a small shift of my weight, a half step. To anyone watching it looked like nothing. To me it was everything. It was the whole geometry of the next 30 seconds, decided in the placement of one boot. "You've got the wrong man," I said. "I don't think so." His 3-jointed hand drifted toward his heavy jacket. "The scan doesn't lie. You know what a verified silence war signature is worth on the right market. You know how many people would pay just to have you kneel. Here's the thing, I said quietly. And I want to be careful how I tell this part, because it's the part everyone gets wrong. I didn't feel powerful. I want that on the record. Standing there, 41 years of hidden peace behind me, a young officer at my back, 4 killers closing in, I didn't feel like a legend. I felt old. I felt tired. I felt the ache in my bad knee and the weight of the noodles still in my left hand because I hadn't thought to drop them, and I remember being absurdly aware of that, of the fact that I was about to do something terrible while holding a bag of dried noodles. But some things live in the body. You don't forget them. You can bury them under 90 years of quiet and they'll still be there, waiting, patient, like a knife under a floorboard. Here's the thing, I said again. For 112 years I have wanted, more than I have wanted anything, for nobody to ever need me to be that man again. His hand closed on whatever was under his jacket. So I'm going to ask you once, I said. Walk away, take your 3 friends, tell whoever sent you that the scanner was wrong, and I promise you that tonight everyone here goes home. He laughed. That was his answer. He laughed and he drew. I've been asked since to describe what I did next. Reporters, historians, a conquered tribunal, a 9-year-old Sethri child once who found out who I was and asked with total seriousness whether I could throw a moon. And I never have a good answer because it doesn't live in words. It lives in the body, and the body is faster than the mouth. But I'll try, for you I'll try. The tall one drew first, which was his mistake, because drawing is slower than already having decided. I had already decided. I decided the moment I saw him leave the departures board. I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't have one. I hadn't carried one in 90 years. Another thing people don't believe. I reached for him. His weapon came up. My left hand, the one with the noodles, swung, and I let go at the exact right instant. And a bag of dried noodles is not a weapon, but a 2-kilo mass moving fast into someone's eyes is a distraction. And distraction is the only currency that matters in the first half second. He flinched. His shot went high and wide and hit a girder, and everybody in the market screamed, and the day cracked wide open. By the time the noodles hit the floor, I had his wrist. I'm not going to pretend it was clean. It wasn't. I bent his arm the way arms don't bend, and the weapon dropped, and I had his own momentum turning him into the second one, the one coming off the maintenance ramp, and the 2 of them tangled, and I moved through the tangle like water finds the low ground, and that's the part I can't explain, the moving through. In a fight, everyone else sees walls. I see doors. I've always seen doors. It's the only gift I ever had that mattered, and it's an ugly gift, and I hate it. And it has saved more lives than I can count. The third one had a longer weapon and more sense. He didn't close. He backed up and leveled it, a proper rifle, and there was a clear line from its muzzle to my chest, and no door I could reach in time. An officer, Nayla Vantros, shot him. I need you to hear that. The whole galaxy tells this story like it's about me. The warden of Harrow's Deep, 1 man, 4 killers, the market on Vesindral. But it is not, it was never only about me. Because when the third one leveled his rifle at my heart, a young gray officer who had held a duty scanner 90 seconds earlier drew her issued sidearm with both trembling hands and put a stun bolt through his shoulder, exactly the way her training taught her, center of the widest mass, and he went down screaming and non-lethal and alive. Alive, she kept him alive. In the middle of all that, she kept him alive, because that was who she was. The fourth one ran. I let him. I want that known too. I could have caught him. There was a door. There is always a door. But he ran, and a running man is a man who has decided to live, and I had promised that tonight everyone goes home. So I let the door close. Then it was very quiet. Not silent. Never silent. We don't do silent. It's the whole point of us. Someone was crying. The fruit vendor was frozen mid-pack, holding a glowing melon like a shield. A cargo announcement blandly reminded departing passengers to secure their belongings, and the sheer stupid normality of it hung over the wreckage like fog. 3 men on the floor, 1 moaning, 2 out cold. A market full of frightened people, slowly realizing they were still alive. And me, standing in the middle of it, breathing hard, 41 years old and 150 years old at the same time, with a broken bag of noodles at my feet and rain still falling from a fake sky. My hands were shaking. They always shake after 90 years, and they still shake. Anyone who tells you the shaking stops is lying or was never really there. Officer Vantros lowered her sidearm. She looked at the 3 men, and at me, and at her own hands, and I watched her understand what she'd just done. That she'd drawn her weapon and fired it at a living person for the first time in her career, and that she'd done it to save the warden of Harrow's Deep, and that both of those things were now permanently true about her. "You're okay," I said. I moved to her, slow, hands open. "Nayla, officer, look at me. You did everything right. You did everything right." "I shot him," she whispered. "You saved my life." "I shot him." "Yeah," I said gently. "That's what it feels like. It's supposed to feel like that. If it ever stops feeling like that, that's when you should worry." I put a hand on her shoulder the way I had before, and this time she leaned into it just slightly, just enough. "You kept him alive. You had every reason to kill him, and you kept him alive. Do you understand what that makes you?" She shook her head, small. "Better than me," I said. "It makes you better than me. That's the truth, remember it." The slate uniforms arrived then, her backup, 6 of them, weapons up, shouting the way you shout when you come in late to something already finished. And in the noise and the confusion and the blaring of a dozen questions, Officer Nayla Vantros straightened her spine, wiped her face once with the back of her hand, holstered her sidearm, and became a professional again. "Officer Vantros reporting," she said, and her voice barely shook at all. "3 hostiles down, 1 fled, no civilian casualties, requesting medical and a secure transport." A pause, and a private word with the station warden. "Now." They looked at the 3 men on the floor. They looked at me. And I watched every one of those 6 slate uniforms slowly understand that the small officer they'd half ignored for a year had just walked into the worst thing any of them had ever seen and walked back out standing up. One of them, older, a sergeant by the marks, looked at me for a long moment. His eyes went to the broken bag of noodles, then to my face. Then very slowly something in his expression changed, the way Nayla's had, the way a person's does when the picture steps off the page. "Harrow's Deep," he said, not a question. "I'm a mechanic," I said one more time tiredly, knowing it was over. "You held the line," he said. And then, I swear this is true, I have never been able to explain it to anyone who wasn't there. The old sergeant, in the wreckage of the market, in front of 3 downed criminals and 6 frightened officers and 100 civilians, brought his fist to his chest and bowed his head. And one by one, the others did the same. And then the civilians, the ones close enough to have heard the name, the ones whose grandparents had lived because of 6 hours a long time ago. The whole market went still and bowed its head in the falling rain. And I stood there, a tired man with shaking hands, and I did not know what to do with any of it, so I did the only thing I could think of. I bent down, and I picked up my ruined bag of noodles, and I held it, because it was the only thing in that whole cathedral of a station that made any sense. They tell it differently now, of course. They always do. They leave out the noodles. They leave out my bad knee and the shaking, and the fact that I let the 4th man run. They leave out that I begged them at first to keep it quiet, and that it didn't work, because a thing that sighs cannot be kept quiet. That's the joke of my whole life, isn't it? That the one man who'd give anything for silence became the one thing that could never be silenced. But mostly they leave out her. So let me put her back. Her name was Nayla Vantros. She was a young Sethri officer on a wet Tuesday, and she scanned my ID because I stepped over a yellow line, and when the whole galaxy came for me, she stood at my back and did not run. She kept a man alive who did not deserve it. She was braver than the legend she was standing next to, and she never once believed me when I told her so. The Warden of Harrow's Deep is a story about 150 years and 9 million lives and 6 hours in the dark. Fine, keep that story. It's true enough. But if you want the story I actually lived, the one I'd tell you if it were just us, if the rain were coming down soft over some quiet market and nobody was bowing, it isn't about the war at all. It's about a small gray officer who was afraid and stood anyway. That's the part worth remembering. That's the part I hold onto on the long hauls, alone in the dark with the drive core humming. Not that I once held a line. That she did too.